by the sea,
by the beautiful sea.
you and me,
You and me.
oh how happy we'll be.
When each wave comes a-rolling in,
We will duck or swim.
and we'll float it
Hello,
around the
welcome
water.
to another episode of Our Lives, Our Future. I'm your host, Harry Orgovan, and we were just using Dr. Bronner's hand sanitizer. We're sponsored by the South Bay Historical Society, the Chula Vista Heritage Museum, the Chula Vista Library, the City of Chula Vista, and don't forget, when you're out and about, wear your mask. We have 25,000 masks that were offered here at the library at F and 4th. You can come in and pick them up, and these are free. So we've been giving them away for 1 week now, and I'm pretty sure they still have plenty. So come on in, come by, and just walk up, and they'll hand you your mask. We're very honored to have with us the council person from District 1, John McCann. Welcome, Mr. McCann.
Thank you very much for having me, and this is great being here because I still remember when I was a little squirt running around here and enjoying this library. So this library has a tremendous amount of history.
Why, is it okay if I call you John?
Yes, you bet.
Okay, so let's start off by learning about where you were born and raised and your early education.
Sure. My mom and dad were living in Chula Vista, and my mom was pregnant. My dad went to Vietnam. She went back to home with her parents to Connecticut, had me. So I actually was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and then I think it was 6 or 8 weeks later, then came back out to Chula Vista. So I've all my life have really lived here. I wasn't actually born here, but I've lived all my waking life in Chula Vista, and went to Parkview Elementary School, went to Bonita Vista Junior High School. Now it's Bonita Vista Middle School, and Bonita Vista High School, then went on to San Diego State and earned my bachelor's and master's degree in economics.
So your grandfather, he served in the Navy in World War II, is that correct?
Correct.
What was your father's particular job in the Navy?
Sure. My dad was a line officer. He was very fortunate enough to go to the Naval Academy. But it's interesting because my grandfather was drafted, and I think he was 35 years old. He was one of the oldest draftees, and he was here down at in San Diego, and he was on the USS Wake Island. And my grandmother tell me stories about how she would be across the bay from Coronado in these Quonset huts, and as they said back then, loose lips sink ships. So they would never really understand or tell where the ship was. And she still has these great stories about they wouldn't get letters for several weeks, but suddenly then they'd get a bunch of letters, and they would try to write every day. And then one morning, she remembered there was all this commotion, and then everybody ran down to the trolley to go across to meet the Wake Island ship because it came back from war. And she said it was incredibly emotional because your husband went off to war. He had been gone for a long, long time. You didn't even know if he was still alive. And they would sit there and watch the sailors come off the ship, and it was amazing because she said almost everybody would cry when their spouse or the person that they were looking for came down because they knew they were alive. And she also said it was bittersweet because not everybody was able to make it back. So it was just a lot of history with the Navy, with my grandfather and my father. My father actually was the commanding officer of the USS Anchorage, and he was a South Dakota farm boy, and he went to the U.S. Naval Academy to have a free education, college education, because he couldn't afford it any other way. And he thought he was just going to do his couple years in the Navy, but as he says, he wound up doing 28 years and then retiring. So it was one of those things where we always think about, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go over here. But sometimes you find out you really enjoy things, and he really loved the Navy, and it was a great opportunity.
Uh-huh. So you also have a career connected with the Navy. You enlisted in the Naval Reserve, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was able to serve one of the cornerstones of my family. And just to go back a little, my father and my mother, unfortunately, things didn't work out. They got divorced. The positive thing, though, is when they did divorce, they divorced here in Chula Vista. Mm-hmm. So my dad went off to do other things in the Navy around the world, but I got left here. It was very challenging for my mom, incredible worker. She worked at the Aurora Industries factory for almost 28 years, and she just was just a hard worker. Every year she would get the Perfect Attendance Award, and that was one of those things where she just loved it, and she wanted to do the best she could. But I was very fortunate enough to be able to join first the Navy Reserve. I joined as an enlisted member, and then was fortunate enough to be able to get promoted and get a commission. And I still remember when I was talking about joining when I was married with my wife, and she said, well, what is the reserves? And I said, well, the Soviet Union has come down, and we won the war in the Gulf War, so things are very, very peaceful. And then 9/11 happened. Then the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq happened. They needed additional manpower for combat support. And they took many people. I was called part of the individual augmentee program. And they took many Navy members, and we went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We went to Army combat training, and then we were sent, half of us sent to Afghanistan, half of us were sent to Iraq. And we were basically embedded with the Army or the Air Force. And so I actually went all the way up. I was one of the only Navy guys on Mosul Diamondback forward operating base. And it was funny. I wore Army combat uniform, but I was in the Navy. And if anybody is in the Army or the Navy, there just were so many funny things, because they would always call me captain, even though I was lieutenant at that time, because it has the same 2 bars and everything. But it was, I was proud to serve, very, very challenging, but I'm just happy to be back and happy to be with my family.
So you mentioned your mother worked for Aurora Aircraft Industries. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. She again, was very, very fortunate to get a job here. And going back to the 80s and even before that, Aurora Aircraft was essentially sort of the company town. Chula Vista was a one-company town, mm-hmm. and the majority of us, the citizens, worked at Aurora, had some connection with the Aurora, or then the Navy. And it was great because we were able to just meet so many people. One of my favorite soccer coaches, Roger Hyde, worked at Aurora Industries. Just so many stories about Fred Rohr. Obviously, the biggest park in the city of Chula Vista is called Aurora Park. Mm-hmm. And there were I remember one of the stories that they would always talk about was some of the community leaders weren't necessarily happy with Aurora being in Chula Vista, and they didn't really understand the economic benefit. So what Fred Rohr did was pay everybody in silver dollars. And when that happened, it was amazing because some of the retailers still, after a year or two, couldn't get rid of all their silver dollars. And then the community leaders realized how much of a financial impact they did. And we still have a bar on 3rd Avenue called the Silver Dollar. So it was great history.
So what actually did your mother do while she was at Rohr?
Sure, she was called an MRP planner and worked at Weldements. Essentially, she continued to move up and then wound up in human resources later in her career. But as my mom would say, she would do whatever she could to work hard, keep her job, and to put food on the table for us.
So after high school, you continued your education at San Diego State University, I believe, and you worked towards your degree in economics. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I loved finance, I loved economics, and I still remember I was in the right degree because I would go to an economics class and many of the other students would be either bored or trying to nod off, and I would just be incredibly motivated by it. I just found it very, very fascinating. I was very fortunate to be able to be in a field that I really liked, and after I received my economics degree, I spent a summer at the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, and that was a great opportunity just to work in Washington, D.C. And the neat thing about that was we were able to work with both sides of the aisle and be able to find out both perspectives. And I think that's something that we need to always work hard to be able to do, is try to understand other people and find out how we can resolve solutions together.
Uh-huh. So during the summer you were going to college, you mentioned you were back in Washington, D.C., and you were a courier for the Pentagon.
Yes.
And you also would take things from the Pentagon to a place called Crystal City. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
One of the positives or a silver lining was that when my father advanced in his career, he worked at the Pentagon, and I would many times go out from here, Chula Vista, and visit him, and got the idea that if I'm going to go visit him every summer, I might as well get a part-time job. I went ahead and applied for different jobs. Ultimately, there were a couple jobs I wanted but didn't get, but there was one job that they had, and I was able to bring documents back and forth from Crystal City, which was a really nice area that had a lot of the DoD facilities, and then was able to bring it back to the headquarters at the Pentagon. And one of the neat things about the Pentagon is people don't really realize it when they're walking in there. I mean, they see that it's a 5-sided building, but if you walk around, it's very, very easy to get disoriented. And just a lot of history there.
So Crystal City, that's an underground city, is that correct?
Part of it is underground, but most of it you could, and that was the great thing, is during the southern summers, it was very, very humid and very, very hot. So it was an easy way for people to get around and be able to move around underground in the air conditioning.
After your initial college experience, you went into the banking industry. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the banking industry was one of the best educations. I had worked in, got my degree in economics, then my master's degree in economics, worked at the Congressional Budget Office. We examined the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation's monetary fund. It was a couple years after the S&L crisis. So they wanted to make sure that if the savings and loans fund didn't do very well, they wanted to make sure the banking fund would do well. And we analyzed it. It did. Obviously, that was way back before the financial crisis of 2008. Mm-hmm. But at that time, it was fully funded. I loved banking. It was wonderful. Wore a 3-piece suit or 2-piece suit, and had a big desk, and people would come in, and was able to help a lot of people. And after I got my master's degree, though, I thought, okay, time for me to move up. and we're looking at many different options in the area. And I was able to find a company, a medical technology company, that was interested in me. I had always been a computer nerd, so they needed somebody to help on the computers. And I still remember going in, and this was when people were moving from dressing really, really nice at work to more of a business casual. And I would go interview on Fridays, and I would still sit there, and people weren't wearing ties, and some people were wearing shorts, some people were wearing T-shirts, and I was used to everybody wearing a tie and a jacket. And so I was able to, frankly, be able to move up to each interview, and then I went in for my final interview, and an incredible guy, one of the founders of the company, Ron Taylor, he did the final interview. And I still remember I walked in, and he was in Tommy Bahama shirt and shorts and Birkenstocks. So I thought, okay, it is a casual environment when the boss, president, CEO is wearing that. And he said, John, we really like you. We want you to come work for us. We're going to first, the bank has some very, very strict hours. You're going to have more flexible hours here. We're going to give you stock options. And we also, if you haven't noticed, don't have a dress code. And then we're going to pay you 3 times as much money. And I said, okay, I'll go. So it was really a great transition to the medical technology and high-tech positions that I did for the next 20 plus years. It was wonderful working up in Sorrento Valley. I hope that in Millennia, our new project out east, we'll be able to attract some good biotech, high-tech companies that will give the city a lot of good, high-paying jobs in Chula Vista, that people won't have to, like I did, drive to Sorrento Valley every day. And you look at, we have over 80,000 people each day driving outside of Chula Vista to get to their job. I'd like it where we could not only live in Chula Vista, but be able to work in Chula Vista too.
So during this time you were involved in the technology industry, you attended classes in the evenings, I believe, at UCSD, and you got your teaching credential. And was that for just adult schools, or was that for any type of teaching position?
Sure, that's a great thing, because I love teaching. Teaching was one of the funnest experiences I've ever had. What happened is there was an adult school principal, and I was friends with Daryl, her son, and she said that they needed computer teachers at that point in time. And so she encouraged me to become an adult school teacher, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get my adult school teaching credential at that time and be able to go work at various adult schools in the South County. And the credential was mainly a general credential, but I had a minor in English in college, so I was able to teach ESL, I was able to teach basic computer applications, I was able to teach math, things like that. And so I had different classes, and it was essentially, I would always tease people because it was sort of my bowling night. I would be able to go out, teach a couple nights. I would be able to help people, and I'd help them in whatever way they wanted to. And I later then went on to teach at Southwestern College, which was a great, great experience. But I have to say, when I taught at the adult school, it was one of the best things, because the people that I would help were so appreciative. And I still remember I would teach people how to use Microsoft Word, and then after 6 weeks they would come back and say, hey, I did this letter or I did this report for my boss, and he was just thought the world that they had done something great for their boss. There were times when I was able to help them with ESL and be able to understand or create a resume for them. And there were many times, and this was always sort of the joke. I had Tom Teagle was the principal at the time at Montgomery Adult School, and many times these people would come in and they were very, very appreciative. So they would, we would teach them something on Word or Excel, or be able to help them learn new words in English. And then, so they would maybe next time bring in a bunch of tamales or bring in some food to sort of celebrate every time. And I would always sort of get the talk by Tom Teagle, hey, you're not allowed to bring food into the classroom. And I go, okay, I'll tell them not to. But they would, and but it was very, very it was very, very giving, and it was really neat because I just loved my students, and I loved the way that they were able to help grow and to do better in learning English and learning computer applications.
Mm-hmm. Are you still teaching at Southwestern?
No, I'm not. I wish I was. When I became a council member, that was sort of the switch over because I have a wife and 4 kids. I need to be able to spend time with them. Believe it or not, city council is a part-time position, and I want to make sure that I spend enough time with my family and then also enough time to do a good job as a council member.
So you were also on the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Most people have probably been to the Boys Club. It's off Oleander, and it's a really, really nice facility. It also has a skate park. There's been many challenges with the COVID-19, so they have decided to go ahead and not extend their lease, which I'm really, really sad about. But being able to help these nonprofit organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, like the YMCA, are just great places. They provide good daycare to the community, and they give positive places for people to play and have activities.
You're also a member of Kiwanis Club
Yes.
of Chula Vista. Can you tell me some things about that?
Sure. Kiwanis Club is a service organization, and what they do is they look for opportunities to be able to help in the community. One thing that they do is they participate in one of the best programs that I love is what they call it Christmas in October. And it's not just Kiwanis, but it's Rotary, it's the fire department, police department. Everybody comes together, and what they do is they will find a older citizen that maybe has a house and they haven't been able to, because of physical limitations or economic limitations, be able to maintain their house as well as they would like. And what we'll do is we'll take one day, we'll go in, we will do all the landscaping, and we've gone as far as to be able to fix roofs, fix doors, fix windows, and things like that. So when the folks from Christmas in October leave, there is a substantial improvement for that property, and it's just one of the great things where I very much see all these residents that are very, very emotional and very, very helpful, and it's great to see everybody come together and really be focused on helping these citizens.
So you've helped raise money for Children's Hospital and the American Cancer Society. Tell me what that was like.
Sure. Actually, I have to give credit to my wife.
Okay.
My wife, Missy. She grew up in the area too. Her parents, Dick and Joan Wiley, used to own a restaurant called Tomatoes Restaurant. And when I was dating Missy, that's sort of one of the places where we used to go, and it was a wonderful place. I have to say, I learned more about the restaurant industry, and when people go to restaurants, they need to realize how hard people work in the restaurant industry. My father-in-law would get up at 5 a.m. to open up the store, get ready for breakfast. He'd work all the way through lunch. Then he'd go back home for a little bit to rest, be back for dinner, and then he'd close down the shop, at 11 or midnight. And the people that work in restaurants just do a tremendous, difficult job. And I really learned how difficult it was to be able to work in a restaurant and to be able to maintain a restaurant with that. But my wife was part of an organization called Children's Hospital Auxiliary. She went around doing fundraisers, being able to work on things to be able to raise money for the Children's Hospital. She also then was selected, because she did such a great job, to be the spokesman for 1 year for the American Heart Association. And she did a great thing, and they did a big reception, were able to raise money. And it's very, very interesting, because most people don't realize that the heart, even though men seem to always be looked at as having major heart problems, women actually have major heart problems too, and it's one of the main causes of death in the United States. And the American Heart Association wants to make sure that not only men, but also women understand what they need to do to keep their heart healthy and to be able to help people that have challenges with their hearts.
Mm-hmm. So when were you first elected to be on the Chula Vista City Council?
Sure. I still remember when I ran the first time for middle school for an office, and it was, I think, in my, for representative in my classroom. Mm-hmm. And I remember that we did the voting, and I got one vote, and I voted for myself, so it was me. And so you learned a lot, because you need to be able to put in the time and effort so people know that you'll do a good job. And I had always been very active in the community. I had served on several commissions in the city of Chula Vista, from the Housing Advisory Commission to the Beautification Commission to the Planning Commission. Mm-hmm. And then I ran the first time in the year 2000, and I came in third. Uh-huh. But the great thing about that was many people run, and I think it's the statistics, something like 80% of the people who run don't win the first time. But most people who do run figure out that maybe they don't want to do it ever again in their life, because it's a very unique thing. There's some people that I met I didn't know, and they were 100% behind me, and I very much appreciated that. There's other people who I've never met, and they just didn't like me no matter what. So, you just have to be able to focus on bringing people together and finding out how you can create solutions. So in 2002, I came in third, and figured out that I really liked talking to people. I really liked trying to find solutions, and even though it was very tough, I wanted to go and still help my city. So I ran again, was very fortunate to win in 2002. I then won re-election in 2006, and then a couple years after that I was mobilized in the war in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, it was interesting because I thought, I've got 4 children, and I think there's some issues that I could improve at the high schools in the city or in the Sweetwater district, and I'll run for Sweetwater Union High School district. And I was very fortunate to be elected there. They had some major challenges, but I was able to, at the end, be able to build a strong financial foundation. When I joined, it was during a really bad recession in 2010. We were able to go from a negative cash flow to a positive cash flow, build up the reserves. We were able to actually, in the end, give the teachers the raise and decrease the class sizes amount so there were less students per teacher. And I feel that we really left the school district in a solid financial foundation and some good things to happen in the future.
Uh-huh. And then you ran for the city council again. What year would that be?
Sure. And then I was very fortunate to get back on the city council in 2014. There were several things that I felt that we needed to get back on track. When I left to go to the war in Iraq, we had 44 police officers in the city of Chula Vista. When I was off the council, we went below 200 police officers. And I felt that we had a great safe city, but we still needed to do things better and make public safety a priority, which we were able to do. And other things, I used to have a neighbor at my mom's house when I got on the city council who would, when I would go visit my mom, he would come over and ask me about how's that Bayfront project going. And I would actually, tell him, give him an update and say we were moving forward and everything. And then he would always tease me that, John, the Bayfront project's been around before you were even born. The project has been, ideas have been circulating since over 60 years ago. And that was another reason why I wanted to get back on the council, was to be able to get the Bayfront done. And you look at most cities in the entire world, and the closer you get to the Bayfront, the closer you get to the water, the higher value of your property values. We're one of the only cities in the entire world where the farther away you get from the water, the higher your property values go. East Lake, Otay Ranch, those are where some of the most expensive properties are in the city. And we want to make sure that to be able to revitalize the west side where I grew up, and to be able to really get the revenue to be able to support the libraries and cultural arts events and things, we need to be able to create some type of economic engine. And that's one of those things where I wanted to be able to come back and help on that.
So talk to me about your future vision for Chula Vista and what you see taking place for our city in the future.
Sure. Great question. I would like the city of Chula Vista to be able to not only have a great place to live, but a great place to work. We have the Millennia Project, which I talk about as a mini Silicon Valley. We have a lot of biotech companies, high-tech companies that I'd like to be able to attract to Chula Vista. Many of them, believe it or not, have manufacturing and factory facilities south of the border. And I've talked to people who drive all the way from Poway, get over the border to get to their factory, and then to have to drive all the way back. In Millennia, all they'd have is a 10-minute drive to get over the border. They'd be able to interact very, very quickly. So I think there are great opportunities to be able to attract high-tech businesses. The second, obviously, is the Bayfront. I think when you look at the city of Chula Vista and the Bayfront, There are many times where I think we've always been at the end of the line, and it's finally time for Chula Vista to get in front of the line. When you look at Seaport Village and all these other improvements that the Bayfront and the Port District have done, it should now be Chula Vista's time. We were getting a chuckle because about a year ago, the Port of San Diego started talking about redoing Seaport Village when we haven't even done our Bayfront. And so we need to make sure that we get the Bayfront done. I think we're in a very, very good process right now. I think we're very, very close. We have two major projects. One is the Gaylord project. It would be a hotel, resort, convention center, and it would be over $1 billion project. We are very, very close in putting the infrastructure and the financing for that deal. I think once that happens, it's really going to change the face of the west side and help revitalize most of the west side of Chula Vista. South of that, they have the Pacifica project, and that's going to be something where they're going to have actual housing, so you're going to actually be able to live in housing, have commercial centers, but it will be able to make sure that it's a public access and a place for people to be publicly as well. So we're trying to find, or I think we've found the right balance, and we're going to continue to try to find the balance to be able to revitalize the Bayfront and the west side and to make that happen. And then a little longer term project is the university project. Mm-hmm. This is something that even back when I was in college and grade school, they'd talk about, someday in Chula Vista we'd have a university. In the 90s, they talked about UC, University of California, Chula Vista, but they weren't able to get that push. So then next decade, they said, well, let's look at the Cal State system. Again, there were challenges of what they call sort of too many mouths to feed at the Cal system, where they have all these universities, and it's hard to get another university because the current universities don't want to necessarily share money with the other, a new university. Then we've gone to look at other nonprofit universities, and so we're still working. Right now we have St. Catherine's that looks like it's a potential for starting even about 10 acres. But we'd like to continue to look for, I would call an anchor university to be able to come down, and I don't put any limitations, because when you look at a Harvard or a USC, they have these large, incredibly endowments that have billions and billions of dollars. And the idea that if Harvard wanted to come to the West Coast and create a college, they would have the funds to be able to do that, and we would have the land. I know that many of these are concepts, but we're looking to be able to make something happen. And when you look at the city of Chula Vista, and not only the city of Chula Vista, but the entire South County, we're one of the only places in California that doesn't have a four-year university. I went to San Diego State, very proud Aztec. We were on the 8 freeway, but you go south of that, and there really isn't a university. And so we need a four-year university, and I think we will be able to do that. We just have to keep moving forward and keep working hard.
So we had a war effort in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and can you tell me, are there any memorials in Chula Vista that you've helped to propagate or put forward?
Sure. One of the things that I want to make sure that people are memorialized when they fight for the United States for freedom and go off. They put their life on the line, and not everybody comes back. And one of the things, when I first got on the council, we did a program with Sunbow to be able to name streets after World War II veterans, Vietnam veterans, Korean veterans who were from Chula Vista. That project was built, and then the war in terrorism, global war on terrorism happened. And I wanted to make sure that we continued that history. And in Otay Ranch, I was able to work with the Baldwin and Sons home builder, who were just incredibly great. We were able to name streets after individuals who had gone to fight in the wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and I can say that was probably one of the most heartwarming and emotional things for me. We had a groundbreaking where we talked about what each one of the military members had done, and basically honored them by giving them a street that was named after them. But we didn't tell the family, but we made street signs for them so that they could have that street sign to be able to remember their child with. And I still remember giving away the street signs, so they would talk about like Michael Martinez and what he did and all the great things about him, and then I would hand the family the street sign. And I still remember just utterly tears, falling, and how emotional it was when we did that. And I knew that we had done the right thing when people were so emotional and so happy to be able to name and dedicate streets after them. And forever, they're these individuals who had served and given the ultimate sacrifice would have streets named after them.
That's very good. I appreciate you working for that aim. So one of the things you're involved with, I understand, is youth soccer, and I also remember you were promoting professional soccer in San Diego here. So talk to me a little bit about your soccer interest.
Sure. My family's a soccer family, and 3 of our children played soccer, and we went from AYSO to them getting recruited by club, and have done all the soccer tournaments from Lancaster to Las Vegas. So it's been an amazing time. We've just loved it, but I hope that at some point in time, not just the city of Chula Vista, but the city of San Diego will be able to actually have a professional sports team, soccer team. And I think when you look at the past World Cups, who had the highest viewing attendance for World Cup soccer? Well, it's San Diego County. I think there are a lot of opportunity to be able to actually have a home team that we can all rally around and unite by, and I would love to be able to be part of being able to do something in bringing a professional sports team or some type of team that we all can support. Mm-hmm. When you look at it, I still remember when I first became a council member, there was a game at the Jack Murphy Stadium, San Diego Stadium, Qualcomm Stadium now, where they had Argentina versus Mexico. And I remember there was a big flap because the city of San Diego at that time said, oh, it's a soccer game, nobody's going to come. It's not going to be a big deal. And so suddenly there was all this concern because the stadium was filled because of all the Mexican fans, all the Argentinian fans, and it created gridlock. And I think there's many times where people don't understand that it's not just the city of San Diego that loves soccer, but it's south of the border. And especially with the Olympics in Los Angeles coming up, if we could share in being able to do some type of the events in Chula Vista or San Diego, we would be able to draw people not from Chula Vista or just the county, but also from south of the border. And we'd be able to hopefully find those fans that would love our teams in soccer, and hopefully a professional soccer team.
Remember, we have an exhibit here, Ruth, Remember Us, the Holocaust. And I understand you've had a chance to review it and take a look. So what do you think?
I think it's wonderful. I was incredibly fortunate to meet Ruthie before she passed away. I just can't say enough great things about her. I was able to go to one of the high schools, and she was able to give a presentation. The challenging thing is, I think there's a lot of people that don't always understand the whole impact of what happened. And I think this exhibit is able to show what did happen. And we need to be able to never forget so it never happens again.
Very good. John, I want to thank you for being with us here today. You had so much to share about your roots here in the South Bay, your grandfather, going back to your grandfather, your parents, and you have worked hard for our community. You have a true interest in our community, and you're always working hard to provide the best for everybody. And we really appreciate that about you, John.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. And every day I just want to go out and try to help people and make things better in Chula Vista. And I just am very honored and fortunate to be able to do that as a city council member.
We appreciate you, John, and thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you all. Our lives, our future. Bye-bye.
Is rich,
Ma is rich.
so now what do we care?
I love to be beside your side.
Beside the sea, beside the seaside,
By the beautiful